Hi.
Hello.
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 Okay, so let's get started now. So on the Language Link World Tour, our teachers are going to share with you where they come from, their hometowns. And I would like to share with you my hometown. So, cool. Okay. So hello.
Hello.
So the Language Link World Tour. So we're going to start off with just a little information about me. So I'm a teacher at Language Link's Central School. I have been working with Language Link for almost 3 years. I arrived in February 2017. I spent some time teaching in Zelenograd and then started teaching in the Central School sometime last year. Some of my hobbies, some of the things I like to do in my free time. I like to play video games. I like to play the drums. Fortunately, that's not something I've been able to do for a long time. And I also like to play lots of Dungeons and Dragons. With the quarantine recently, I've had to do that online, which is not quite as fun, but at least I still get to enjoy my hobbies at this time. So, a little bit more about me. There's me. I prefer to be called Nick. Nicholas reminds me too much of being in school. I'm from the UK, and I'm from a small town in the UK called Accrington, just to the north of Manchester. So it's just about here where this arrow is. The town has lots of connections to other places, lots of roads and railway routes. So, for example, to get to Manchester is very easy. It takes 30 minutes and you're right there in a city, so it's very convenient. So, a little bit about my hometown. Here is a picture of the center of my hometown. People in the local area call it Aki. Anyone from Accrington never refers to the town as Accrington. We all call it Aki. It's been on records from at least 1194, possibly a little bit longer, but the earliest record can show that it's from that time. The records show it as being known as Accrington. The town name has had multiple different spellings over the years, but always the same kind of name. The origins of the town's name are not exactly known, but the town was surrounded by lots of oak trees. So the idea is that the town name originates from this in very old English as Acorn Ring Town, which over the years transformed into Accrington. And as an example, that is just one of many roads in the area surrounded with many trees. And because it has this kind of idea behind it, lots of the street names are named after trees and things like this. So as an example, we have Acorn Avenue, we have Birch Crescent. The majority of street names are named after trees, with the exception of Russia Street, which, interestingly enough, is the only street in the UK to be named after Russia. We can maybe take a look at that street a little bit later. So the history of Accrington. Here are a few pictures, all taken quite recently. But many years ago, hundreds of years ago, when the town was just forest, the old kings and queens of England would use the area to go hunting for deer and things like this. The town was one of the few forests that were designated as only a hunting ground for royalty. So if a local person went out hunting deer, they would get in lots of trouble. The oldest building in the town is this church here, called St. James's Church. It dates back to the 1500s. Parts of it have been rebuilt since then, but there are elements to the church which are 500 years old still. And as a little piece of interesting backstory, in the 12th century, the town came under the control of a group of monks, and they began to introduce very harsh laws and taxes on the local people who did not like that very much. So they attacked the monastery where the monks lived and they burnt it down. You can still find the monastery in the town, left in its condition, hidden away somewhere in the forest, and it's in a part of the town that's known as Black Abbey, which is probably in a reference to that attack. But for accurate historical information, there's not a whole lot of information on this. Okay, so next we're going to skip forward a couple of hundred years because not a lot happened. It was a small village. When the Industrial Revolution happened, Accrington changed dramatically from a quiet village into a busy industrial town. Here are some pictures from the early 20th century to show how the town was beginning to build up, lots of houses and things. The population growth increased dramatically as well. Over the case of 40 years, the population went up by 40,000 people. And it was focused mostly on textiles, so it was for materials for making clothes, for coal mining and engineering, making machinery for other factories throughout England. Okay, now the thing that my town is most famous for is the production of the strongest and the densest building bricks in the world. They're known as Norrie bricks, and they have a very distinctive red color to them. They were supposed to be called iron, but there is a theory that there was a mistake in the mold of the bricks. The letters were placed backwards, and it came out as Norrie, but the owners decided they liked this and they kept the name. The bricks are used quite a lot in England to build houses. Lots of houses in the UK are very strong, and there is an expression to talk about something being tough. I won't share the expression because it has some rude words in it, but it originates with these bricks. By far the most famous building that was built using Norrie bricks is the Empire State Building in New York City. Norrie bricks were used to lay the foundations to what was at the time the tallest building in the world. I was searching for information. I could not find anything about how this happened. Why did New York decide to go to my small town for bricks? I'm sure they had bricks of their own. There are some other famous buildings that were built using Norrie bricks as well. There is Blackpool Tower, which you can see as a picture of here, which is a seaside resort in the north of England, lots of theme parks and things. And the Hacienda in Manchester, which in the 1990s was a very famous nightclub that lots of celebrities and people would go to enjoy and dance and things. Okay, so now a little bit about history. The Accrington Pals. So the Accrington Pals was a part of the British Army during the First World War. In order to encourage people to join, the government decided to create these things called Pal Brigades, where the idea was you could sign up with people from your town, your friends, your workmates, go off to France and fight together. And when the war broke out in 1914, 700 men from Accrington signed up instantly, all workmates, brothers, friends, people that lived on the same street. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme, on the 1st of July, the Accrington Pals finally saw their first day of action. Unfortunately, most of them were killed in the first 30 minutes of the battle. They were totally unprepared for the attack. The defenses were very strong, and a large chunk of the male population were just wiped out in a matter of minutes. But one of the soldiers that survived was awarded the highest award that you can be given in the British Armed Forces. He was given this award for bravery, for attempting to save his friends and drag them away from no man's land. I mention this because the story of the Accrington Pals became very famous, very well known throughout the UK. It was used as an example to talk about how terrible war is and the effect it has on people and communities back home. And since then, there have been many songs and plays and documentaries made to tell their story. A lot of my history classes in school were about learning the story of the Accrington Pals. So another thing that my town is very famous for is football, of course. Accrington was one of the 12 founding members of the English Football League in 1888. Unfortunately, the team has never been very good. After, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years, the club had to resign from the league because they were just terrible and they didn't have as much money as other teams. And after a few years, they were able to re-sign again under a different name. But then in 1966, the team went bankrupt once again. And the town was left without a football team for 2 years, which is very unusual in England. Every town has a football team. Even small villages will have a football team, just maybe not a professional one. And the local people invested in the club in order to try and bring it back. The club became very famous in the 1980s because of a milk commercial, which we will watch now.
Any lemonade, if you want. Milk! Ugh! It's what Ian Rush drinks. Ian Rush? Yeah, and he said if I didn't drink lots of milk, when I grow up, Might it be good enough to play for Accrington Stanley? Accrington Stanley? Who are they? Exactly. Nah, get off. Give me some. Get off.
So there, yeah, it became a bit of a joke that if you were bad at football, then you would play for Accrington Stanley. And then during my my life, I've noticed lots of people, especially older people, know about this team, even to a point where when I visited Australia, there were people that asked me where I was from, and it was, oh, I'm from Accrington. Oh, I know Accrington, Accrington Stanley. Ah, doo-doo. So it's one of the other things that make the town quite famous. From the moment the team was brought back in 1968, they played in non-league football for a very long time, until in 2006, when they finally were able to rejoin and become a fully professional team once again. Right now, they play at the third level of English football, which is not great, but for a small town, it's quite good. Okay, so next we're going to look at some places of interest, some fun places to go to. Now, it is only a small town, so nothing like Moscow, but there are a couple of things. There is a leisure center, which is essentially just like a gym. There's a huge swimming pool. There is badminton courts, football pitches, squash courts, tennis, rugby. You can go there and do lots of sport. There's the local cinema. There used to be a bowling alley, but that's no longer there. There is an art gallery, the Haworth Art Gallery, which has the world's largest collection of Tiffany glasses. There is a skate park, which myself and my friends spent as teenagers many years going to local town meetings, petitioning, trying to get a skate park, because we had nowhere to go and skateboard or ride BMXs. And eventually the town listened to multiple demands and created the skate park, which is still there now. There are a lot of parks as well. Here is a picture of a park called Oak Hill Park, which is the biggest and most famous park of all in Accrington. And then as a final place, there is an indoor market hall. The market hall is quite old, but you can go there to get clothes, little bits and pieces, some antiques, all kinds of things there. Okay, and then as a last point for Accrington, in 2012, during the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, to celebrate her 60th anniversary, she traveled around the UK and she visited my very, very small town. And there was a lot of excitement in the town that, oh, the Queen's coming, yay. And here is another short little video, which is going to talk about her trip there.
The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh arrived to a rousing welcome at Accrington Market Hall, where they met local business leaders before unveiling a new coat of arms commemorating Her Majesty's visit.
Oh.
Outside, Her Majesty and His Royal Highness met some of the waiting crowd before making their way to Accrington Town Hall for a reception with civic leaders from the Lancashire and Cumbria community. From the town hall balcony, the royal couple watched a march past of people from community, uniformed and voluntary organisations to music provided by the Gurkha Regimental Band, ending the first day of the Diamond Jubilee tour of the North West of England.
Okay. And that is a short little presentation on Accrington. So what we're going to do now is we are going to 1 second. We are going to go on a tour of my hometown. I'm going to show you we're going to start in the center of the town. So here is the town hall, where the mayor lives. Over here, if we go, we can see the market hall, the indoor market hall. There's an Indian restaurant, an Italian restaurant, I'm sorry. Amazingly, a Blockbuster Video. I'm surprised they're still around. What we'll do from here is I will take you on a tour to from the town hall to where I went to school. I will show you where my high school was. So we would go up along here. Here are some shops, lots of bars. There are many bars in my hometown. We will see lots of them on the journey to my school. Over here, we can see lots of travel agents and estate agents. So if you wanted to buy a house, you would go to this street and you would find lots of places. Up there's another bar. We go over onto this street now, and we'll go along. Let's jump forward a little bit. Some more shops, some charity shops. Here, one of my favorite shops as a teenager was a local music shop. I would go in here and stare at the guitars and the drums that I didn't have enough money to pay for. And we'll go along. Look, another pub. So many of them. And there's another one. And we'll keep going. Here is lots of homes. And considering that a lot of the forest had been cut down over the years, it's surprising that there are still so many trees in the area. Over here, we can see a small hospital. If you ever had a minor injury, you could go to this hospital for treatments, but for something more serious, you would need to go to another town. And then we go along this road, lots of houses. This is quite a nice area of my hometown. We keep going, and we keep going, and here we are. And this was my high school. This is where I spent 5 years hanging out with friends, learning. The building actually looks quite different now compared to when I was at high school. But I think we can see this room just here is where I would go every morning to take the registers and things before I would head out and start learning all of my different subjects with all of my different teachers. And I talked about showing you Russia Street. So let's quickly go over to where Russia Street is, and I can show you that, which is probably going to be easier to find if I do it like this, because it's quite far away. Oh. Okay, here is Russia Street. It is just a residential area, and it's one of the nicer residential areas in this part of Accrington. And I was quite surprised when I did my research and found out it was the only street in the UK to be named after Russia. So that is the end of my tour of my hometown. Unfortunately, there was not a whole lot to show you because it is only a small town, but I'd like to spend this moment now answering any questions that you have for me.
How long Russian street name been named?
I think it's been there for maybe 60 or so years. That area was built up in like the 1960s.
Recently, very recently.
Yeah, quite recently, compared to the rest of the town.
Why in the 12th century England decided to make a street named after Russia?
No, it was not in the 12th century. It was 60 years ago.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I don't know why they decided to name it after Russia, but it was just an interesting point to discover.
Were any celebrities that came from Accrington?
Kind of. No one that it would be internationally famous. Anyone that has seen the third Harry Potter film, the bus conductor on the night bus, he's from my hometown. There are some other people like a woman called Mystic Meg, who in the UK was a famous astrologer. She's from Accrington, so she would, use her psychic powers and talk about your future. She was very famous 20 or so years ago. Also, lots of sports people, lots of cricketers and footballers are from my town, but no one super famous.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
What's the weather now in your hometown?
It'd be quite similar to Moscow right now. Kind of starting to get a bit warm, but still kind of a little bit cold. Katie, you have a question.
I've got a question, Nick. How many people live in Accrington? What is the population?
Right now, I believe it is at around 70,000 people. It's over the years, it kind of swallowed a few smaller local towns into its area.
What do you miss about your hometown, Nick?
Yes. Compared to Moscow, I miss how it's quiet. And there are areas I can go to be completely alone. I can go to a park and there will be no one else there, and I can just be outside and relax and be alone. That's the thing I miss the most about it. It's quiet, and there are small areas you can go to just think by yourself, by the river or something.
During quarantine, you can go in every park in Moscow and it's still be no people there.
There are no parks within 100 meters of my flat, unfortunately, so. Okay, are there any other questions?
Now, does your family still live in Accrington?
They actually don't, no. I left my hometown 11 years ago, and my family left a couple of years afterwards. All of my family now live in Manchester. There are a lot more jobs and a lot more opportunities in Manchester compared to my hometown. So there are maybe a couple of people I went to school with that are still there, but I have no personal connections to the town anymore.
I see. Thank you.
Does Accrington accent exist?
I'm sorry?
Or does Accrington accent exist?
Kind of, yeah, a little bit. It's kind of like a general Northern English accent, but Accrington has some very specific vocabulary. So you'd say things like, oh, chuffy neck, if something was surprising, or everyone is lad or love. All right, love, how are you doing? All right, lad, how's it going? But not a specific Accrington accent.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Is location Accrington in England or Scotland?
It's England. It's in England.
England.
Yeah, it's very close to Manchester. It's a 30-minute drive to Manchester, so it's very close.
Central of England.
Kind of northern England.
And in comparison with Moscow, what is your impression? I mean, Moscow is big city, but for example, what do you think about main difference?
The size mostly is different. Looking at the size of the streets, as we went on our little street tour, then we noticed the streets in Accrington are very small, they're very narrow. But the main thing is the size. Also, the people in Accrington are quite friendly because it is a small town. A lot of people know each other, so.
Yes.
Sorry, Nicholas. Don't you think that Zelenograd, where have you been studying, isn't quite same as your hometown?
One of the things I liked about Zelenograd is all of the forests. It was nice to kind of be around trees and things so soon after leaving home. But it takes a long time to get to places in Zelenograd. Whereas with Accrington, it's easy. 20 minutes, you can get to anywhere in the town. If you walk, so.
Is a rail station in Accrington?
Yes, there's a railway station. It connects towards Blackpool, the place we looked at that had the tower. And there are no direct lines to any major cities, but you can go on connecting stations.
Is there a river or a lake nearby? Where do people
there are some small lakes where if you have a license, you can go fishing. And there is no rivers, but lots of canals, which are like man-made rivers, which were all built during the Industrial Revolution, easier to ship materials and things through the canals. Oh, someone has a dog.
One more question.
From a dog.
All right, okay, well.
Very much.
Wait, I have a question.
Sure.
The city was always quiet or something events were happening?
It's always been quite quiet, to be honest. When the Queen came to visit was, I think, the biggest event ever in the history of the town. So, yeah, it's a very quiet place.
Okay, thank you for your interesting presentation.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
My pleasure.
So goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.